As part of efforts to reduce the cost of governance, President Muhammadu Buhari on Wednesday approved a directive for ministers, directors general, and other top government officials to submit travel plans for clearance.
In a statement by the media aide to the Secretary of the Government of the Federation, Willie Bassi, all ministries, departments and agencies are now required to submit their yearly travel plans to the Office of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation for express clearance within the first quarter of the fiscal year before implementation. According to the directive, all travel days will no longer attract payment of ESTA code allowances, as duration of official trips shall be limited to only the number of days of the event as contained in the supporting documents to qualify for public funding.
Some of the directives also states that without approval from the President, ministers, permanent secretaries, chief executive officers and directors in the ministry are restricted to not more than 2 foreign travels a quarter. Joining us now is a public affairs analyst, Achike Achude, to talk about this. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. Now, the president, like we have said, has cancelled ESTA code for ministers, reduced travel to 8 in a year. Some have praised this move, and some have also criticized this move as being insignificant when you talk about cutting cost of governance. But for you, what is it really?
It's tokenism. I mean, one would want to say that perhaps the philosophy behind that is motivated by patriotic reasons. I mean, I'm not in a position to judge the president, but on the surface, it looks good. They want to cut down the cost of governance. People are worried about it, and we are in dire straits economically. And obviously, we have problems, not just with. I mean, for a very long time, we have been operating, serious budget deficits, in our budgeting. And so there is a need to do something drastic and something critical. And I'm not exactly sure that this, constitutes a drastic response to the very serious problems that we have in the country. People want something like this to be much, much deeper. We're talking about infrastructure. We're talking about all those social infrastructure that make it, difficult, if not impossible, for government officials to seek recourse to certain services, social services abroad instead of here in the country. So while they are at it, cutting down the cost of, again, it's one thing to, say something. It's another thing to actually, act on it. So we will just take it at the surface level, that perhaps maybe they are serious about it. But while we're at it, we also look at those who travel abroad, depleting this country of scarce foreign resources, sending their children abroad. The president has also been a major beneficiary of the medical trips that he has undertaken in this country. Of course, we know that, so much money is expended on that, and not just in the governors, the ministers, and so many of these other people too are also benefiting from that. And then you also have, other areas that the government also needs to look at. The issue, for instance, of the MDAs, parastatals, agencies of government. Of course, we know that in 1995, the government then set up the Alison Aida panel to look into that. Yeah. And then after that, in 1999, they made Joda panel. Yeah. Again, also for the same purpose. Then later, the Steve Orosanye, committee was also set up. And of course, as at that time, we had about 541, departments, agencies, of government. And the essence, of course, recommendation was made to that effect. But not so much has been done in that regards. But beyond that, again, is this. Even when we're discussing the issue of labor and, the agreements and all that, the reality is that the underlying problem of this country has not, nobody's bothered to look at it. We have a dysfunctional, polity in the country. And so, whatever you do, ultimately at the end of the day, even when you make economic projections, they're not going to work out. They're not going to work out because you need to resolve the political contradictions that make it impossible for our political leadership to deliver on good governance. Right. So if you're not, able to do that, then you're going to be blighted continuously with, that inability to, even as much as, no matter how good your projections might be, but you're also going to have the issues that underline.
We have to leave it at this point. We'll definitely continue this conversation. Achike Chude, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Breakfast. Of efforts to reduce the cost of governance, President Muhammadu Buhari has approved a directive for ministers, directors general, and other top government officials to submit travel plans for clearance.
All ministries, departments and agencies are now required to submit their yearly travel plans to the Office of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation for express clearance within the first quarter of the fiscal year before implementation. According to the directive, all travel days will no longer attract payment of ESTA code allowances, as duration of official trips shall be limited to only the number of days of the event.
Some of the directives also states that without approval from the President, ministers, permanent secretaries, chief executive officers and directors in the ministry are restricted to not more than 2 foreign travels in a quarter.
Well, joining us now is a public affairs analyst, Achike Chude. Thank you very much for joining us. Okay, pleasure. In all of this now, a lot will be cut down for foreign trips. Do we have the political will to ensure that?
I don't know. I don't know, because we have also seen a government that has been long in talk, but short in ability to execute what it has said. But I think the good thing is that at least I have said, like I said before, one understands the thinking, behind that. They want to save as much money as possible. Whether they're able to do that is a completely different thing. But again, beyond that, and I must, because these are just, very temporary measures that will not, resolve the problem of the huge expenditure that we have today in governance. There are critical things that need to be done. And so you ask yourself, again, they must be able to put figures to even some of this directive that the president is saying. If he says, look, this is what we want you to do, they should be able to tell us what the situation has been before now. They should be able to tell us how much is being expended every year before this directive came, before this directive was made, and how much is going to be saved in the process. So you just don't make statements in the air. You must back it up with facts and figures. It does not mean that the president himself will be the one doing all the compilation. So what people will sit down and say, look, we are going to save 50 billion naira. So that gives you an idea that you are going to have 50 billion naira, that you're going to now use for other things within the economy. But beyond that, again, I mean, the issue of we are all saying that the cost of governance is high in this country. So you're looking at departments, agencies, and parastatals, which we have talked about earlier. Yeah. You need to do something about that. You need to do something about the remuneration that the
that's
the legislature.
Where I am headed. Remuneration of the legislature. We saw that the 2020
and the executive too, because the executive is always silent about what they are also getting. I can tell you that it's not small money they are also being paid.
All right, we see that in the 2020 budget, about 125 billion was budgeted for the legislature. And also there has been talks about, when we go back to the Steve Orosanye report, he talked about the fact that ministries should be merged. And then the then president, former President Goodluck Jonathan, has said that he is limited because the Constitution also says there has to be about 36 ministers. And so where do we begin if we really want to cut down costs? Because he was saying there has to be an amendment to the Constitution.
I agree, 100%. That was what I was telling you, that the solution does not lie in, fine, we understand the economic projections that are made and all that. We understand the role of economists and the rest. But beyond the economic permutations is the fact that we need to get the politics of this country right. There must be some kind of restructuring. And so I'm not just talking about, the physical restructuring of this country. There must be, a new kind of orientation. We must have a new class, class of political leadership in this country that is truly committed to growing the nation and developing the nation and all of that. So we must have the buy-in of the political elites in this country on the Nigerian project, define what the Nigerian project is going to be and all of that. When we talk about great countries that were once in a position today. You talk of the Singapores, you talk about even China
yeah.
at a particular point in time. There was a political leadership that sat down and said, look, what kind of country do you want to run? How do you want to achieve, the dreams, that we have, for our country and for our people and all of that? So they sat down
when we had the democracy in 1999, that was what a lot of people expected.
Well, our politicians have not shown, the kind of commitment that is needed to turn a country, to move a country,
forward.
Yes, to move a country forward. That is a reality. So you can come up with, why is it that up to today, for instance, when you talk about a country that is richly blessed, endowed in terms of natural resources and human capital, and yet you have a country, the same country wallowing in obscene poverty. You talk about extreme poverty in this country. You talk about the 112 million, Nigerians living in poverty and all of that. So it is the politics. Resolve the political contradiction in this country, and then you begin to now look at the, how to turn the economy of Nigeria around.
All right, Achike Chude, thank you for your time on TVC Breakfast.